Welcome back. Thanks again for joining us. And thanks again to all of our panelists for a very thought-provoking series of presentations and discussions. We're looking forward to having a chat with all of them and with all of you here over the next, 15, 20 minutes or so, even up to 30 if we can keep the party going. And I want to actually, so we've got a lot of questions in the chat, a lot of stuff we want to get to, but I want to start with something that my colleague Lisa from the Papers of Thomas Jefferson project raised in the Slack channel. And that has to do with the technical side of all of these projects and the technical expertise you all brought to the table when you began these projects, and what lessons you learned along the way, and what opportunities did you have to reach out to various members of your respective institutions to assist in the project? What level of support did they provide, and how have you worked to make these projects sustainable, and so that other people can join with a limited amount of expertise, or in the foreseeable future, if you transition off to another opportunity, someone can pick up the reins where you left off. And maybe we can start with the folks at the Folger and thinking about that project and seeing what your thoughts are there.
Sure. In terms of technical expertise, we have some at the Folger. So Mike Poston helped us develop Dromio, and then also worked on the design of Emo. And then Emily, knows Luna inside and out, and so has been, great for navigating Luna and getting the transcriptions out of Dromio into Luna. In terms of building and supporting the crowd of volunteers, we've used it. I would say we're starting to realize that transcription is description, and we're thinking about our cataloging and description team. We're starting to think in new ways about what they do. And during the pandemic, we've had plenty of opportunities to teach more people at the Folger how to read English secretary hand, and are even thinking of let's put that into their job description, that one of the things they do is transcribe manuscripts as part of cataloging and description. There was also a question there about crowdsourcing, was there, Jim? Or
actually, I think I'm going to separate that out because I want to come back to it. But yeah, okay. but thank you. Wasim, what about on your end? Because you were doing some really fascinating stuff with Google, which both in translating and using Google Docs. So I'm curious to hear more about that process.
Well, it was something that I'm sure it was something that I just discovered a couple of years ago, or maybe which somebody told me that they managed to. They were transcribing some book or something, and they told me that to simplify the process, there were ways of to scanning the page and saving as an image and OCRing the page. And I think there's a paid for version at Google, and there's this free one which was just using Google Drive and opening the image as a document. But I was told that the accuracy here was not as good as the paid for version. So we haven't really. I've not really had any other technical advice from anybody else. But as I just happened to try the. I just tried to test it, how the transcription worked with the Bengali script, and it looked really good. and that's how I started with the Bengali cataloging as well.
Well, it's a good example too of how to keep costs low as well, or keep the infrastructure costs low, and certainly using tools like that. The Andrew and Vanessa, how about on your end?
So you're asking about technical. I was typing something in the chat. I'm ever so sorry when you're asking the question. It's about technical expertise needed, was it?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Well, I think, as I said at the beginning I sort of came into this not expecting. I was there at the beginning of our project as to manage the cataloguing, and then I expected to fade out, you see, and I've actually sort of been continuing. So I had no technical expertise or knowledge at all, and I think Vanessa really had very little when we started to look at the projects, because we had a digital curation manager who was very keen to work on it was his baby really. He was keen to do the work on the transcriptions and take that forward. And as he left, it was then left to Vanessa and myself to sort of take it on. So really we just sort of teach ourselves really as we went along. And also the fact that we were having volunteers work on it, we obviously had to train ourselves and then train them. So I think we were just developing our knowledge as the project progressed. And then I said we had to correspond with Abby about some of the things that we discovered about the software, and they were really quite helpful, but it was all quite a learning curve, I think, for both of us. I don't know if you've got anything else to add, Vanessa?
Just to acknowledge the help that we got from the National Library of Israel, who do have expertise in OCR in Hebrew, obviously. So without them, I don't think we could have, we wouldn't have known where to start, really. Luckily, we do, as Andrew said, we did already have a license for Abby, and it had been used for other projects. So there were staff who'd worked on those projects who at least knew their way around the software, although it had never been used for Hebrew before.
And can I just sort of say on the subject of the license, it was for, I think, 5, it used at 5 PCs or something equivalent, wasn't it? So can you imagine when we had volunteers trying to work on the pamphlets, we had to sort of it all had to be timetabled so that they could be supervised on the one hand, but obviously weren't all there at once on the other. And then of course the staff had to use it. So we had nominated PCs. I had it on a laptop, which I had here at Essex. So it was quite a difficult logistics process. So I think that was more complicated actually in the end than the technology itself, I think, to just make sure that we all had access to the software when we needed it to do the work. And as it was a funded project, we obviously had deadlines to work to. So that was the trickiest thing, wasn't it, Vanessa, I think?
I think some of the biggest frustrations in life is figuring out who gets to have the Abbey license at any given point in a project. Fergus, how about yourself?
Well, I was originally trained as a computer programmer, and that didn't go terribly well. I started working for an insurance company and hated it, and quit within a week and went off to Eastern Europe for 15 years. This is a random tangent. So when I came back to Scotland and started developing, I had some degree of skills, but was very rusty. And it's been very much an ad hoc learning curve for me, learn what I need to know for the next step. And here my business partner has been very helpful. I call her the asker of awkward questions, because she feeds back. I produce a system and she goes, well, yeah, that's all very well, but why doesn't it do this? Or can it do that? Or, what I'd really like, so there's this sort of feedback loop goes on, and then she knows that she just needs to ask me, and I'll go off and figure out how on earth I'm going to do it. And can be a bit of sort of coding rabbit holes for that. But I mean, one of the things I would say is that people tend to get scared of coding. And it's not actually all that difficult, the basics of it. And start small. And what we've done is, as I say, I'll add a little function at a time. And over the course of the last few years, we've added multiple functions for doing just little things that make the whole process of what we're trying to achieve that little bit smoother, that little bit faster. And what we do, we have an agreement within our business that we each get a certain amount of time to just devote to something that may or may not pay off. Just a little project that it intrigues us. Let's try it, see what happens. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. So a lot of the stuff that the software that I've been developing comes from these little side projects. It'd be quite fun to try and do that.
Well, there is another question, I think, and it gets to some of the questions that we saw up in the chat here in thinking about the reciprocity between the work that you're doing and either the volunteers that you brought onto the projects or the student interns. And we talked a little bit about that yesterday in the couple of sessions, even on Wednesday as well. But curious to learn more about in each of your projects. And Fergus, you've already touched on it, so I'll come back to you here in a minute. But the ways in which for the Folger, you're getting fresh perspectives from your transcribers, possibly from the other projects as well. What does that look like? And I guess I'll kick it back to the Folger since I just mentioned your name.
Emily, feel free to jump in with any comments. I mean, I'll start by saying all of our volunteers are really partners in knowledge co-creation, and we have so much respect for them and have learned so much from them. Their value it became a two-way street of knowledge exchange very quickly. And I think that's what has kept them coming back and has kept us continuing to invest in them and providing, the scaffolding in terms of, alphabet keys, and they've created their own little glossaries and dictionaries and Unicode equivalents, not just for themselves, but for us to use and other volunteers to use. And nurturing that, especially this year during the pandemic, has provided such an incredible sense of community. So we have different groups that will meet at various times in the week over Zoom and either transcribe together or transcribe independently in the same room. And we'll talk about goals and sprints and, for beginner groups, what they want to learn next or what they want to transcribe next. And so we give them the skills that enable them to do that. But as I said at the end of my part of our talk, it's hard, we can't do justice to their generosity ever. We can name them, we can thank them profusely, but it's labor that is not compensated monetarily, and so that's the tricky part always.
Andrew, Vanessa, what are your thoughts on that head?
Andrew, do you want me to answer this one? Yeah, I think that's a yes. So working with volunteers, the part with the volunteers was really just a kind of add-on to the work that the paid project officers were done. It was supposed to be a pilot for something that there's a kind of whole initiative at UCL called the Connected Curriculum, which is about connecting teaching and research. So we thought this would be a great way of involving volunteers in something in working with the collections in a different way. Unfortunately, well, there were two problems with it really. One I kind of alluded to at the end, which is having realistic expectations. So we kind of gave the volunteers a sort of short list of pamphlets for them to choose from, and some of them chose quite long pamphlets, which was then quite demoralizing because they didn't get to the end. And then the other problem was there was a strike in universities during the middle of the project, and a lot of the volunteers didn't want, well, not all the, some of the staff were on strike and not all the volunteers wanted to cross picket lines, so it kind of fizzled out a little bit. But there have been other projects that UCL using volunteers that have been very successful. So I was thinking when we were hearing about the Folger, about the Transcribed Bentham project at UCL, which is transcribing Jeremy Bentham's voluminous correspondence. And that's been going on for some years, and I believe it's very successful. And we just, at the moment, we've just started another volunteer project looking at identifying, as part of kind of liberating the curriculum, decolonizing initiatives going on at UCL to identify parts of our collections that speak about the lives of people who've maybe been marginalized. And that's, because of the current situation, going to be a completely online project, and we had huge interest in that. So it'd be interesting to see how that goes.
And I think in addition to what you said, Vanessa, this particular project we're working on, we offered it for volunteers, but of course you can never tell where the volunteers are going to come from or who they're going to be. And we'd envisaged it would be students from the Department of Hebrew and Jewish Studies, because the texts were in Hebrew and Yiddish, and we thought that would be a way they could sort of look at language skills, because of that was the focus of the collection. But in fact, all the volunteers were from the Department of Digital Studies, Digital Humanities, I think, wasn't it?
They were from the department, most of them were from the Department of Information Studies, and they were doing MAs in Digital Humanities.
Digital Humanities, that's right. So they were more interested in the transcription progress. So some had Hebrew language skills. They did have the language skills in cases, but many didn't. So they were just interested in using the software. So of course, once they gained that skill, that for them was the end of what they needed to do. We presented it as a training program. And as Vanessa said, some of the pamphlets they chose were quite long, and so because they didn't get completed. And I think that the difficulty then was to try and monitor what pamphlets had been worked on. Well, we knew what they'd chosen, but we couldn't really, it wasn't evident to see how far they'd actually progressed. And so it meant that often we had to re-look at work that they'd done. So it's quite difficult to just keep a progress sort of track of it. And following on from what Vanessa was saying, the fact that it's going to be incorporated into the Connected Curriculum project, the idea was then that this work would be part of the sort of student experience for students in the Hebrew and Jewish Studies department. And they were then planning to introduce this as something they would do every year, a program working with the pamphlets that we digitized. And of course, then the pandemic has come along, so that sort of stalled it, hasn't it? So it's a pity, because we've had all these various things that we've started to do and all these sort of good ideas, but every time there's been some little sort of mishap, like the strike action and this, and so it's very hard to keep the momentum going, isn't it? But we struggle on, don't we? We keep going and smile through it all.
Sometimes that's the best way to do it. I want to come back to some of the other questions with about technical implementation and the relationship to between the academic teams and the development teams here in a second. But there was a question that was posed to Wasim in the chat, and I think it's applicable to everybody on the panel, and it's about the exportability of the models that you're building and the extent to which what you're producing could be used by other projects. And so where do you see yourself sort of on that question? Do you hope to one day to be able to make it exportable so that someone could adopt the techniques and methods that you have been developing for other collections as well? And whoever wants to start, just raise your hand and jump in. Vanessa?
Yeah, I mean, that was part of the whole rationale for this part of our project, and one of the ways we sold it to the funder was that it would be a model for other similar projects, and that's why we've published this report that's available in our open access repository, because there's actually been remarkably little work done on OCR of Hebrew's printed material. There's been a lot done on manuscripts, so we were really hoping that it would be a project that other people could use, and hopefully some of the problems that we came across well, some of them seem to have been solved by Abbey themselves, but some of them people will be aware of. And one of the other things that we didn't really go into, but one of the things we wanted to get out of it was a sort of log of common errors that occurred in the transcription so that people could look out for them. So we found that there were certain Hebrew letters that were often a bit like was talked about with Bengali. There were certain Hebrew letters that often got mixed up. So again, we're hoping that would be useful to other people. Don't know if you want to add anything on that, Andrew.
Well, yes, when I spoke to colleagues at the sort of in similar doing similar work at the National Library of Israel, I think they'd sort of stopped using, because they had recommended Abbey Fine Reader to us, but they'd discovered the same thing, that it was very, very time consuming to use. So I think they were, I'm just looking to see what they'd said. They were looking at other ways to correct printed text by sort of machine learning, word recognition, machine learning, which is a little bit what we've seen in this editor project, where when it's read through those law, the case studies, and picked out the entities. And I think that's the sort of approach they were looking to develop. So really, it's a case of we've done a little bit. We've sort of done a report for them. Now we want to, they probably have progressed since, and maybe can share something more up to date with us.
Heather, I think I saw you raise your finger there for a second.
I did. Yes, I mean, that's our goal, is to make the output interoperable with other people's output. And also, because we're not in the archives, we're a collection, special collections library. So a lot of our material connects to other things in other libraries, and we want to build on those connections. So we're hoping, and we have a pilot project with our recipe books, because we have a Mellon grant about early modern foodways that allowed us to do that. We're creating reading copies of all of our recipe books that have been transcribed. So not only are they searchable, full text searchable in Luna, but they're also available as PDFs and then XML upon request, so that people can do more things with them. And we just started a project using From the Page software to collaborate with any institution who wants to collaborate with us on transcribing their recipe books, so that we have a common standard for transcribing them. So we started a week and a half ago, with the Royal College of Physicians and the Wellcome Collection, who each put up a recipe book to transcribe using agreed upon editorial conventions. And Emily, maybe you want to say more about the potential outputs of that and the potential overall of that?
Yeah, so just in our one-day transcribe-a-thon, we had a recipe book from each institution fully transcribed. And we ended up having to actually put up a third recipe book because people were going through them so quickly. Once they're vetted, which is in process now, we'll be able to output in a number of formats. We can get TEI, we can get plain text. There's spreadsheet export options. And I think they're looking into, they have, From the Page have a grant to look into more export options over the next year as well. So we're hoping to then, people can read them directly on From the Page. We're hoping to also be able to export those in a way that works for their home institution so that they can share them as well.
Sounds pretty tasty. Wasim, what about on your end? Thinking about how you can take the techniques that you've developed for Bengali script and make them applicable to other kinds of projects.
Indeed, we also have some books in Thai as well. So I'm going to try to see if the same technique works with Thai as well. The only thing is that I mean it's okay. I mean, one needs to at least try to be able to distinguish the letters and get some type of familiarity with the language and how it works, just to be able to make sure that what they are getting back from the transcription is good enough to be put onto the catalogue record. Even though I've managed to do this work, I'd still say that it would we would need to hire somebody who could read Bengali script at least, and who can just go through the records and just see if there's anything that doesn't make sense there. So obviously, so if I'm going to be trying to apply this method to Thai as well, then I need to try to familiarize myself with the how the letters work and see if it's possible or something that I can do. So obviously, the reason, I mean, I'm sure a lot of the libraries around around the world probably will have some forms of some type of books that would need to be catalogued, and they cannot do that because of the technicalities, or just because of the fact that they cannot find somebody who knows how to catalog properly. But I think there are other libraries that are outsourcing this work or outsourcing the work, where they put online old catalogues or the transliteration of the bibliographic details, and ask people if they can transcribe the text into the native language script and send it back to them to be able to get around the fact, or to try to enhance their catalogs. So it's something that I think it'll be good to publicize and try to work. I mean, obviously, the type of cataloging I'm doing is not as difficult or as the scanning and OCRing is that is needing there is not as complex as what I've seen in the past few days. Obviously, those are long texts and handwritten texts, which are a lot more complex.
Well, don't sell yourself short, because I think the work you're doing is going to help make a lot of other texts, more accessible to the wider public. And Fergus, up to you then, because you're developing this probabilistic numerical score, algorithm to figure out who's who in your records. So where do you see that going?
Well, as I said in the presentation, it's very much it's not even at a beta stage production. We've experimented around the edges with some aspects of it. One of the reasons I got involved in doing this was because I was working with an academic at Glasgow University on attempting to I can never say the word prosopographical project, and we were trying to reconstruct the community. And it suddenly dawned on me that actually this is something that I can bring my coding experience, my data geekery, and my knowledge of genealogical methods, and to produce something that's actually more than just a one-off project development. And the record linking is an extension of that. And it's from our perspective, we have to tread a fine line because we're actually a commercial entity. So we don't have any external funding. So at some level, we have to make it pay. But this is where our concept of 10% of our time goes on side projects can come in, because I'd really rather not have to work for a living if I could help it, but I do. So I get the opportunity to do things I'm interested in. And I think the record linking, if I can get it to work the way that I think it will, could be widely applicable across all sorts of areas. I've been talking in the sidebar a wee bit with Mike Bennett and plan to have another longer chat with him about that. And as I say, although we're a commercial entity, we tend to make our data available on the public level, because we're ultimately selling stuff behind the scenes on that. But we do work with various academics on a number of projects where I've got my particular combination of skills that I can bring to the table, in that I understand data, I understand coding, and I understand historical records. And that's actually quite an unusual combination. So, I mean, in an ideal scenario, I'd win the lottery tomorrow and make everything that we do free of charge, open source, and what have you. It's not really an option all round, but what we're looking to do is to make some of it open source, reach out to researchers, archivists, librarians, and come up with some broadly algorithmic solutions that can help do things, because we could work away on what we've got access to even during lockdown, and it would take us longer than I've got left to live, frankly. So if we can produce something that's useful for other people while still maintaining some degree of commercial perspective on it, then that would be an absolutely ideal scenario.
Well, don't go anytime soon, Fergus. Keep plugging
I plan to live for a while yet.
Well, actually, you hit at something that some folks were asking about in the chat, and maybe we'll end it here, talking about the relationship between academics and developers. And Mike Bennett, actually, in particular, was wondering, how you all see yourselves and improving the relationship with developers. Sometimes we think of developers as just the guys who go sit in dark rooms and program stuff, and you never see them. But I think, as we've seen over the last couple of days, developers and technologists are integral to what we all are doing. So how do we break down those silos to increase the collaboration between academics, technologists, digital humanists, developers? And anybody who'd like to start, please do.
Well, I mean, one of the advantages that our setup has is because we're a very small business. Most of the time, it's just the two of us. We do have some associates we bring in now and again for side projects and what have you. Is that something I touched upon with Mike yesterday? Was the feedback loop. I mean, traditional procurement, and I've been involved at some degree of arm's length with larger scale development projects. The traditional procurement approach, and this is why IT projects go so famously wrong, is that the employer says, this is what we want. The developer says, it'll cost you that much. And they go, yep, go ahead. And then there's no real feedback until the developer comes along and says, here's your project, there's my money, see you. Whereas what we do is it's sort of incremental and say, so as I say, my partner Penny will ask, can you do this? And I go, well, let's have a look, get something working. What do you think of that? Well, it works, but can you tweak it in this way? And I think this is where small development teams in archives and university and academic libraries have a real advantage over the corporate world, in that you can close that feedback loop, and with the appropriate communications systems. And that's, as I say, that's why I was asking Mike about their setup at CRC. The developer is engaging directly with the end user in real time during development, and that in larger scale development projects, that doesn't happen, and that's a major issue. And this is part of the reason, as I say, why major government IT projects fall over, because there's the techies don't understand what the client wants, the client don't understand what the techies are doing. It's all just sort of black box solutions. And you pay for what you get, what you pay for. You specify, this is what I want, that's what you're going to get. And if you can incorporate a feedback loop into that development process in real time, in a corporate world, that's really difficult for all sorts of reasons that I won't go into. But in an academic setting, that's really very possible. And as I say, I think that's where you saw it yesterday with what's going on with Editor. The users and the interns are setting out and going, well, that quite works. And then you can see in real time what's actually happening, and developers go, well, yeah, I'll do X, Y, and Z to solve that. That's a bit of a rambling response as to closing feedback loops would be my one big takeaway.
Well, that got us started. Anybody else? Heather?
Yeah, I would just add on to that. The whole terminology of like the client relationship just feels really weird as an academic and a curator and a librarian and an archivist. Like that's not, we've worked on various development projects with developers over the years, and there needs to be a feedback loop. And I see it very much as a partnership, or we're all on the same team, and I don't want to just say, this is what I want, because I don't know if that's the best thing. Like I have a very, non-techie idea of what I want, but I want to hear from the developers like, well, actually, maybe you don't want that. Have you thought of this? Or we could do that. And when you're in that client relationship where they say, like, tell us what the deliverable is, I'm like, well, I don't know yet. I want to work on what the deliverable is with you. And so I agree that that's always a challenge. And one big realization for me was realizing that, you know, in the same way that I value like high quality transcriptions, the developers were working with, like, they value pretty code. And I didn't quite get that initially. And I was like, I don't care what it looks like. And they're like, no, it matters. And so I need to, you know, respect that and understand that better for that better feedback loop too.
Andrew.
I'm going to say from me, because I mean, my sort of hat is cataloguing really. And so I think there's an equivalent for us, which is sort of mark edit. It was nothing to do with transcription, but it's something that's set up with Terry Rees to enable the manipulation of mark records, which mark records can be exported from a library management system, manipulated, then re-imported. And that's fantastic because I've used that quite a bit, and Terry offers this freely, and he engages with the people who use it. He makes tweaks occasionally, and it's so user-friendly. It's a fantastic tool, and it's done like in cooperation with the cataloging community. So that, you know, for those who don't know mark edit, find out a little bit about it. You know, it's a sort of shining example.
No, that's great. Any other final thoughts? All right. Well, thank you all very much to our panelists. Terrific discussion. I think we all learned a lot, and thanks for taking the time to share your projects with us. Really appreciate it. And to move us into the final session for this symposium, Rachel Hosker is going to come back on the screen and walk us through what happens here in our final moments.
Thanks, Jim, and reiterate that. Fantastic. I'm buzzing with questions, buzzing with, oh, how are we going to deal with that collection and this collection? I've been firing questions off to Mike going, does editor do this? So this is a dangerous place to be in Edinburgh on a Friday afternoon with the weekend ahead. I have to wait until we get back in next week and get going with all of the reflection on the past few days. So this is the final stint in the can we do this next week too, Darren? I wish we could. That'd be fantastic. We just talk and plan and work through these things. I think, you know, the community that we've built up collectively with everyone involved is something I'll reflect on later to close, but really fantastic, very exciting. So just to do this final session on reflection on over the past 3 days, I'm going to ask the team that has been meeting to sort out these 3 days over the past couple of months to join me. So can the project team join me on screen? And if everybody else is happy to switch their videos and microphones off, that would be great. And I think I'm going to ask Elise first. We're going to do a little poll, and you're going to give us some instructions with how we do this to get a sense of, and it's going to be a bit of fun, a bit visual.
Yes, so bear with me just as I make everybody spotlit. I'll finish that off later. So we are going to be using Mentimeter just to take a quick poll of how we've done this workshop. So please be honest. We can handle it. So I just want to share with you, you'll need either another browser window available or your phone. So if you can get those things ready, and I'll share my screen. Will I though? Yes. I believe this is presenting. There we go. So as you can see, I hope you can, at the very top, the website to go to and the code. Somebody told me that that's visible because I actually have a bar in front of that.
Yeah, it's visible.
Yes, Great. So if you can pop that into either a web browser or your phone browser, and then you'll be presented with this question.
Totally buy
Elise,
Yeah.
how long? Oh, look, something's happening. This is brilliant. So we've got informative, fascinating, inspiring, engaging. This is great. Let's see what
Ooh.
else is coming.
Good crowd. Exciting, fun. Too short. Oh,
Educational, challenging, lively, revolutionary.
I like that one.
I know.
great.
Collegial. Community building, hope. I like that we've got hope in there.
Mm.
Can be, especially working from home.
Tubular. Tubular. I like tubular.
Yeah.
Well, that's very 1980s. Totally tubular.
Full on. It has been full on.
It has been
That's
full
been,
on.
hey.
Absolutely. Right, well, I think I may just try and move us on to the next slide here. Right.
Gosh,
Great.
that's playing out. I had a conversation with colleagues about this morning with Daryl, in fact, Daryl Green, who's been part of proceedings, and we were talking about, you know, the use we can make of editor, the use we can make of transcribers, and the different pathways where they come together and they merge, you know, can be used in tandem, but then can go off in so many different directions.
Absolutely. Gosh, well, that's fab. Right, well, I'll move us on to the next slide here.
As Elise said, we can take it. More Jim.
Jim, this is when you plug your podcast, I think.
In person, post-pandemic. I think we've heard that a lot.
Mhm.
This is really great, really good feedback here. Thank you so much.
Biscuits. I think, yeah, survival packs will be made.
Yeah, 4 days and shorter sessions. I hear you on that. That's a good one. We'll put that in our reporting.
For the people asking more practical time with editor, the tool is still up. So if you have the link from yesterday, you can go and carry on playing around with it. It'll be up over the weekend, and then it will probably disappear back into the void again.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of technical details, please feel free, grab me on Slack, grab me on Twitter, send me an email. I am always happy to talk anybody's ear off about any of the technology involved.
That's great.
Some really, really fab feedback. I appreciate, you know, there's been a lot of acronyms and different language used for, you know, so I think that's a really good point that someone's made about being able to understand what people are saying. It's easy to do when you're so close to something or worked with something. You use the acronym, and we perhaps need to expand some of that and think about how we go back to the starting points.
Another good point here is just to have an initial list and maybe even a collective list as we go on of URLs just for people to readily click for both sites, project sites and tool information, but also articles or other examples.
That's a great recommendation.
That's a good point.
Okay, well, I think that's the end there. Oh, that's the end. That's all for me.
Excellent, thank you, Elise. And if are you going to sort all of us out in the team so that we become a bit of a tile or a panel on screen on the virtual stage at the end of the workshop or conference?
Yeah. So you actually are spotlit. Let's see. Yep.
There you go.
Good. Well, I thought to kick us off, is it's not going to be me chairing as I have the past. We're at the sort of slightly more you can breathe now moment of proceedings, and I thought we'll go back to the very beginning of Editor and how this has all come about, and ask Norman to reflect on. He developed the original idea beyond a pilot that had happened and went for the funding to allow the project to extend. He also brought all of us together. So he brought, you know, our colleagues from Virginia and Mount Vernon together with the Ianthe and Mike and myself, and then we brought Elise in. So it'd be good to hear from you, Norman, about how you feel the past 3 days have went, or you know, has it achieved what you were hoping to in the end?
Ah, it was rubbish. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing actually. I mean, as I think I mentioned on Wednesday, we first became aware of this resource discovery fund from the Scottish Library and Information Council round about the autumn of 2019, I think. And if I remember rightly, it was quite a short turnaround to put the application in. So we didn't have a lot of planning time to get it in. We got it in around the end of 2019, and we found out we were successful at the end of February last year. And by a bit of a strange coincidence, Rachel, Aline, and myself, along with a few other colleagues, were actually in London setting up for an event in the Royal Geological Society to mark the successful acquisition of the Charles Lyell notebooks for the University of Edinburgh, when we got the email to say that we'd been successful. So it was quite nicely timed in that respect. At that point, COVID-19, or the cloud that is COVID-19, was kind of just kicking in big time. And I don't think any of us thought that by the summer we wouldn't be able to run a live event, far less a year later still be in the same position. So yeah, it took a while to move from the notion of a proper live workshop to doing it online. And when we finally got the permission from the people at the Resource Discovery Fund, it was well into November, I think, before they said yes. So we didn't really start planning this until January this year, in earnest anyway. So it's incredible to think that we've done it in 10 weeks, almost from scratch. It's really quite remarkable that it came together so quickly, that we had such incredible interest and such an engaged and resilient, I suppose, as well, audience, because it's quite an ask to sit for 3 afternoons on the trot for 4 hours listening to, you know, quite difficult stuff. So it's been really impressive that people have stuck with it and have engaged so well with it. So yeah, I'm very pleased with how it's gone, and I'm looking forward to seeing the full feedback that we get from it, and how we've put that into our final report. And especially, you know, we've all been at online events over the last year, and some of them just don't work, and this one definitely did. This has been brilliant. It's been great. And so thank you to everybody who's been involved, whether it's as a participant or from the editor team, because it's really gone well. And I think a special thanks has to go to Elise, because Elise only came in at the start of January on this. She's been working part-time since the start of January and has pulled this together, and it's been an amazing job. So big hand for Elise.
Yes.
Absolutely, absolutely, big hands. And here's the woman herself who's made a lot of this happen in terms of the event planning, making sure that we have polls, making sure that we all knew what we were doing, we were going to be in a right place at the right time. So come on, Elise, to the forefront, to the front of the stage.
Well, I thank you very much. And I actually I raised my hand just to say that I and blown away by this event, and that this is an event that could only have happened in this moment, in this year. The fact that we all are so comfortable, I don't know, comfortable is the word, but capable with Zoom, and that we can all do this. I think if we had asked you all last year to jump on this software and do this whole thing, and we would have thought we were crazy. But in some ways, this platform has been the best way to share these tools with the widest audience. I think the first bid for money and the first project plan was for 30 people, because that's all we really could accommodate in Edinburgh, and to fly over our colleagues from the University of Virginia. And so in some ways, this is a silver lining that has come from the events of this year. As horrible as they are, this has been community through adversity, truly, is being able to share this great work with all of you in a way that we've become comfortable with and become acceptable, that we can all jump on this common platform and use it. And it's been an honor and a privilege to be able to work with you all and to do this. So yeah, let's do it again.
For sure.
Absolutely. I think doing it in person, it'd be great to meet everybody and do the sociable thing so as well, if people want to as well. We've got a few comments saying I'm in. Does anybody else from the team want to come out and what they've really picked up from and drawn from this week? My head's so full, it's difficult to think of specific things, but there's people that have commented, that have presented, that I want to go and speak to again and follow up with.
So for me, I'm definitely re-enthused, reinvigorated, re-inspired, and I think it's been really brilliant to see people getting excited about Mike's work, because we've been so excited about Mike's work. And so it's so lovely to share it and see all the positivity and people thinking about all the collections that they have in their institutions that are just waiting to be shared and exposed using tools like these. So although it's taken a lot of planning, and we're so happy to have shared all this work with you, I'm really looking forward to seeing what comes out of it and what new collections get shared because of this event and because of the inspiration that it's given.
Yeah, I'll say that putting this together and the pandemic's been tough, trying to prioritize a lot of different projects with a very much limited staff of people who can able to do things that isn't remote. And so this has been reinvigorated us, and even this seeing the editor in action and seeing everyone's excitement about it has had us start to rethink, well, how can we take another phase on our project, start integrating it in? And I've got tons of questions for Mike. I've already started throwing them at him, and I'll leave them until next week at least. But that leads me to say again, and to sort of restate what Ayanti said, that this tool is really, really neat, and it's pretty unique, and it's real exciting, and it does all the things that we dreamed about or will. And so the support is really great, and we just got to remember we got to find some money to make it really good.
Well, I'll also pick up there, and I just want to say I'm so grateful to be part of this team, and for the University of Edinburgh to hosting us and just setting a tone of inclusiveness and exploration, which has just been so productive for us. And Lauren we've all been like geeking out about all the tech possibilities and all that stuff, but I think one thing I've sort of taken away is, or I've been thinking about, is how to make arguments about the value of these tools and the value of these projects to administrators, to people who may not speak the tech language. And all our discussions about how these tools are transferable to other projects, right. I think it's been really, really useful in terms of developing that thinking and sort of how we might approach other people.
Yeah, I'd like to just chip in briefly also from the technical side. This project's been really nice from a personal perspective, because there is often this kind of feeling sometimes that's been discussed a little bit today, that development can often feel like it's in a little silo. People come to us and say, I have this problem, and then you go away and you kind of make the little black box that solves the problem and come back and go, there you go. And it's breaking down that kind of thing and moving it more into, let's work together, how do we approach these problems, is a really powerful thing, because I think that is a sort of key way for us opening up these things in the future. So from a development perspective, the project's been really beneficial, not just to me for this individual project, but in terms of how we approach the exposing our collections and doing these kind of wider projects in the future. And it's been really nice to hear from everyone today in the lightning talks, especially about, you know, the different of the variety of approaches that people might come to these collections from, because from a development perspective, that's sometimes hard to get your head round. So it's been really refreshing, this project, for that kind of close-knit integration.
I think our people back, our managers at the University of Edinburgh, I don't know whether they're on this call or not and listening, but you know, the potential of getting us all, when we can, getting us all in the room and you know, pinging ideas off each other from collections perspective, from the development perspective, and having those conversations is really exciting possibility. And my mind is going to particular collections that I want to talk to Mike and Ianthe about doing projects or using the tool or getting the team to use the tool and have that conversation. It's communication is the biggest part of doing these things. So having this event really, really helps. I think I cut off Jim, did I?
Oh no, you're in good shape. I was just going to actually build on what everybody was saying is that, yeah, I'm still sort of blown away by the fact that we were able to pull this off in 10 weeks, but then thinking about how long it's actually taken us to get to this moment, you know, through fits and starts and various research trips. And, you know, like all projects, I think it's a good lesson in, you know, despite circumstances that change, or, you know, people go to different jobs, but still have the interest in what you're doing, you know, surrender is not an option. And that if you want to actually keep moving the ball forward, you know, you've got to, you know, keep moving down the field or the pitch, or, you know, the whatever variation is in whatever part of the world you're in. So just delighted to be a continued part of this process.
I think we've heard from most people in the team. I think we're getting lots of people suggesting that when we have a physical event, that, you know, if we host it in Edinburgh, that there's plenty of opportunity. We put on a good show when we can. I'm sure that Randy and Lauren and Jim can attest to you know, having fun when they've come to. I think that's part of you know, how this has all worked, is we've been able to get on and be able to communicate effectively, as I said. But it's been a joy working with everybody, indeed. Does anybody on the project team want to have any more reflections, or are we all exhausted?
I've got one actually. I've got one that I know that we talked about as a team, but that just came up over and over again from the external presenters to all of our separate sessions, which is that even though we're talking about automation here and we're talking about saving time and speeding processes up, that people and expertise and you know, going back to Fergus's presentation, that automation isn't perfect, that automation you know, has false positives and fails at things. This is where we come in and to provide context, to provide that expertise. And what I found as a transcriber has been that the labor intensiveness of working through difficult material, it takes away your capacity to actually inject that expertise where it needs to go, because you're just exhausted from dealing with the sort of the repetition and the real onerous tasks. And so by employing these sorts of tools, I think for myself and for the team that I've worked with, we've found that using that allows us to do our jobs better, and that we come out of it more satisfied, happier with the job, and ready to do more. Just get me back in there. Do more and make it more accessible, and that only creates more momentum. And hearing as well from the Folger Library that there was that sort of, or maybe it wasn't the Folger Library, sorry about that, but that feeling of satisfaction for volunteers is really important, and involving them in that. And I think this is where these kinds of tools can make that job just a little bit more addictive, as we talked about with sort of data enhancement and stuff, is you just want to keep going. And it's that kind of feeling that we can use this tool to help and to motivate people to get involved.
That's brilliant, Elise. That really is. I think you've hit the nail on the head there of one of the themes, and I think there are several themes that have come out, is that it's people and tech. It's tech and people. It's not just tech, it's not just people. We need the tech, we need the people. It's almost like our shout out. And with these being recorded, we will be making them available online. Bear with us while we edit them to take out the breaks and put them up in a format that's acceptable. So we will keep everyone posted on that. But I think, you know, having, you know, snippets from these recordings to take to, as Randy put, our administrators to say, look at what these people, look at how many people were involved, look at what these people were talking about, look about the power of what is being done here and the potential of what's being done. So, you know, if this can be made use of, then make use of it. Okay. I think that's us done for reflections from the team. If the team are happy, then nod your heads or sigh like Lauren has.
So now
everybody meet us there.
Well, now is your last chance to ask all the difficult questions.
Yeah.
Get them in the chat now or forever hold your peace.
Yeah. There's a couple of minutes because I've got you know, the usual thanks and stuff to do, but again, you know, it's at this point we'd be having the drinks reception, wouldn't we? Or people would be running for flights or, you know, trains or something. But, I would again like to do a big shout out to Elise and all the work that she's done over the past few months. Exceptional organisational skills there. So we're very lucky to have had her on board. I'd also like to thank our funders, the Scottish Library Information Council, you know, for having that foresight to allow us to do that shift change to being online. I'd like to thank the whole of the project team for this event. You know, to Mike, who has, you know, created such a wonderful tool, and to the people who've helped us with transcribers, including Joe Knuckles, who did a brilliant training session for us. And Evie and Nikki and Daisy, who have been in the background helping us. Evie and Nikki are our interns for this project, and Daisy is one of our assistants from the Centre for Research Collections, who've been keeping an eye on the Slack channel, have been making sure that we can move smoothly as we could in this environment. To all of you as participants, you know, we couldn't have this event without you, and we couldn't be at this stage of thinking what's next. And as Jim very, very succinctly put it, you know, don't give up the fight, and there's the next thing can be just as exciting. So this is I would say a starting point. It's at the beginning, it's not the end. And I think we have to now keep this community going. We have to keep the conversations going. And I don't think it's just about conversations. It's about the problem solving. It's about the willingness to access collections going in a variety of phrases and breaking down those silos. So for all of you as participants to join us and be willing to explore these things, we thank you for doing that over the past few days. I'm going to ask the team if there's anybody else they would like to thank, you know, before we close proceedings today.
I think one final thanks to the funders, because this couldn't have happened without the Scottish Library Information Council. Thank you.
Yeah.
So you've made it to the pub already, Norman. I would like to throw out quick thanks just to everybody who attended and the people who used the tool yesterday. It was really exciting for me to sit there and, in my sad sort of geeky way, watch all of the requests scrolling past in the logs and see it actually kind of in real world usage for the first time. So thank you.
Same.
Okay. Watch this space. I'm going to end on that note. Who knows? It's a bit, like what Katie did next, what the editor project, the team, and you do next. And please continue to share your projects with us. Talk to us. Elise has details on the Slack channel staying open so that people can add to it. And we look forward to potentially doing what we can next off the back of this. So thank you all, and we hope to see you very soon, keeping that enthusiasm going. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.